No matter which side of the aisle you sit on, you know one thing for sure. For the last 2 years, the politics in the United States have been wild. Never before in recent history have tensions run quite so high. Old precedents are being shattered, and the future is less clear than it has ever been. As the old saying goes, however, drastic times call for drastic measures. This chaotic time in American political history has swung the door open for significant change and real disruption. Enter Andrew Yang, tech entrepreneur turned presidential candidate. Yang has thrown his hat into the ring for the 2020 election, running on some unorthodox or perhaps revolutionary ideas. Perhaps the strongest pillar of Yang's campaign is the proposition of a universal basic income. Recently, finance magnates spoke with Andrew Yang about his campaign and how cryptocurrency and blockchain technology could play an important role in his vision for the future of the American economy. Andrew, can you to start with, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got to this place in your life as a presidential candidate?
Sure. So I guess I'll go in reverse chronological order.
Right.
Before this, I founded an organization called Venture for America that helped create jobs in Detroit, among other places, Cleveland, St. Louis, Birmingham, Pittsburgh. I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I've spent the last 6.5 years trying to help create jobs around the country. And during that time, I realized that we are going to be automating away many, many more jobs than we're going to create over the coming years, and that it's going to speed up dramatically. The reason why Donald Trump is the president of the United States today is that we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Detroit, Cleveland, St. Louis, Western Pennsylvania, and the swing states, really, and devastated those communities, and they all went to Trump. And now we're about to do the same thing to workers in retail, truck driving and transportation, call centers, fast food, and on through the economy. And for whatever reason, our political establishment is not able to confront this hard reality. And so I've gone to various people saying, hey, what are we going to do about it? And realized no one was going to do anything about it. And so I decided to run for president on a platform of universal basic income, which I'm calling the freedom dividend, where every American adult receives $1,000 a month, free and clear, no questions asked, as well as other things like moving our economy to new measurements aside from GDP, because GDP is just going to keep going up and up even as more Americans lose their jobs. So GDP's terrible measurement to be using, so we need to move to things that will actually indicate how we're doing. And that's actually one way I see the blockchain and cryptocurrency is potentially playing an important role, because if you try and progress to a more sophisticated view of economic and societal progress, then it's very helpful to have different modes of transactions aside from money changing hands.
Right. Okay. So universal basic income is obviously one of your platforms, one of your main platforms of your campaign. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other things that you're bringing to the table as a candidate?
Yeah, so the main premise to my campaign is that we're going through the greatest economic and technological shift in human history, which we are. And so it began with the blasting away of 4 million manufacturing jobs in the U.S., and it's going to continue to tear giant holes in the labor market. The next big one being the retail apocalypse, where 10% of American workers work in malls and stores, and 30% of malls are going to close in the next 4 years. So my platform has 3 big pillars. The first is the freedom dividend. The second is it makes no sense to tie your healthcare to employment if 94% of the new jobs created since 2005 have been temp or contract or gig economy jobs that don't have healthcare benefits.
Right.
So the U.S. needs to move towards a public option Medicare for all single payer system, which I think they have where you are in Helsinki.
Actually, they do.
Yes, and it probably makes you feel a lot better.
There's a reason I'm living here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We lost a great American to Helsinki because our healthcare system is such garbage. In addition to some other reasons, I'm sure you have many good reasons. But the U.S. is spending twice as much on its healthcare as other industrialized countries to worse results because our incentives are all wrong. We just reward activity and expensive stuff as opposed to things that might actually improve health, including sometimes doing nothing. So That's the second big pillar. And the third big pillar is that if GDP, which is something we invented less than 100 years ago, is going to keep going up and up, even as more Americans get pushed into distress, which is already happening. So GDP is at record highs, but our life expectancy has declined for 2 straight years. 7 Americans are dying of drugs every hour. More and more Americans are leaving the workforce. So there are all of these negative social indicators that GDP completely misses. So what we have to do is we have to move to new measurements like childhood success rates, mental health and freedom from substance abuse, environmental quality, median income and wealth, proportion of elderly in quality situations. So I call this new system human-centered capitalism or human capitalism. So those are the 3 big moves. The freedom dividend, which is what I'm calling my universal basic income plan, Medicare for all, and then new measurements for the economy, which I would then present every year as the president of the State of the Union, where I'd say, look, here's how we did last year, here's how we're doing this year, and then start rewarding companies and individuals who move society forward along those dimensions. And that's, again, where a cryptocurrency solution could come in, because if you were to do something that benefits your community, we could give you this new currency that you could then exchange for dollars if you wanted to, and hopefully we can build a parallel economy around positive social interactions.
So is this the digital social credit?
Yeah, this is the digital social credit, which my campaign staff have been telling me to de-emphasize, but I figure if I'm talking to the cryptocurrency community, I might as well.
This is your audience, so yeah, go for it.
Yeah, really, if anyone understands the need, it would be this audience.
Yeah, so the digital social credit is basically a cryptocurrency or like a blockchain-based system that rewards community efforts with currency that can be used for something within the community or just generally?
It would be locally based. If you took it outside of your community, then you can, exchange it and still obviously get some value for it. But it's more valuable in your community.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. So you are like definitely, I would say, like a breakout candidate. How are you financing your campaign as somebody who is just entering the political sphere for the first time? And is cryptocurrency playing
I'm learning
a
so
role?
much, Rachel. It is so interesting.
Tell me.
So I'm, I put a bit of my own money in, and then I'm funding universal basic income for a person in New Hampshire and a person in Iowa. So, I feel so strongly that this is going to be positive for society that I'm trying to lead through example. But I'm happy to say that I'm receiving contributions from around the country from new people every day saying that we do need to progress to a different sort of economy. And our average contribution is only $11, and we were receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we now take contributions in blockchain, Ether, and major cryptocurrencies as well.
In Bitcoin and Ether?
I'm sorry?
You said blockchain and Ether. Did you mean Bitcoin?
I said Bitcoin. If I said blockchain, I certainly meant to say Bitcoin.
Okay.
You know how it is.
Yeah.
But Bitcoin, Ether, and the other major cryptocurrencies, you can now contribute to my campaign at yang2020.com/crypto. But the way we're financing this campaign is really through popular enthusiasm, a bit like Bernie Sanders, where he raised hundreds of millions of dollars in small donations. We've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars in small donations, and we're tracking towards breaking the 7-figure mark, not too long from now. So that's what we're financing. It's just, look, we're trying to reorganize the economy to benefit actual human beings, and human beings like that. It's like there are a lot of people looking around saying, you know what, I could use $1,000 a month. And what my campaign is about building a new type of economy from the humanity up, if you will, focused upon us and not capital or the marketplace.
Yeah, more about quality of life and So if indeed
which, hopefully you do get elected president and you have implemented this universal basic income, do you see the need to set price controls on basic necessities like food, rent, etc., to ensure that these things stay affordable for people? Because there's always this argument against universal basic income that if you give everyone $1,000, then a loaf of bread will cost, I don't know, $100 or something like that.
It's really an overblown concern, honestly. Like, if you look at the causes of inflation in the U.S., they tend not to be around increased purchasing power. They tend to be around distorted marketplaces like education or healthcare, or housing that the government is either subsidizing in some way, like it is with education, and healthcare. I mean, that there are all these subsidies that are going to healthcare, and there's also a principal agent problem where we're not paying directly out of pocket, and then there are these insurance intermediaries, and then the hospitals and service providers have these rates that change depending on who you are. so that's so if you look at the main cause of inflation in the U.S., they're not around consumer goods. They're not based on purchasing power. And if we all were getting $1,000 a month, a loaf of bread would cost more or less what it costs right now.
Okay.
Because there's still price sensitivity among consumers. It's not like if you get $1,000, all of a sudden you're like, I can spend money on everything. And there's still a competition between vendors for that business. Like, and so if Wonder Bread got really expensive after we all got $1,000 more, we'd still be like, why the heck is Wonder Bread so expensive?
Yeah.
I'll try that other bread.
Right.
And so it's impossible for all vendors to collude in all markets simultaneously. And if they went too far, maybe we just start eating bagels instead of bread. So it's like, so the truth is we would be able to retain the vast majority of the purchasing power because of the way that competition would still take place.
Right. And how are we planning to pay for the universal basic income?
Yeah, so the headline cost is a little bit more than $2 trillion a year, which sounds like a lot. But our economy has grown to $19 trillion over the last number of years. It's up $4 trillion in the last 10 years alone. The United States is now the richest and most advanced society in the history of the world, even though we're also now not really showing that in terms of our standard of living or our life expectancy and other measurements. So to finance to 2.1 trillion, the first big thing is that we're already spending between 500 and 600 billion on over 100 welfare programs. And so if you assume that those expenditures reduce the cost of universal basic income, which they would, because if someone's already on disability for $1,200 a month, you're not going to show up and say, hey, you get another 1,000. You'd look and say, okay, you're already getting 1,200, so like we're going to leave you alone. And so it reduces your cost by about 25%. So now you're down to about 1.6 trillion. Now the big move that the U.S. has to make is that the beneficiaries of new technologies, AI, software, autonomous vehicles, are going to tend to be very, very big, rich tech companies who are great at not paying a lot of taxes. They tend to push the taxes through Ireland or some other tax shelter, and then the public doesn't see much of it. So the big change that the United States has to make is we have to join every other industrialized economy in the world and have a value-added tax. Because the value-added tax would then harvest a bit of the transactions from Amazon or the Google searches and the rest of it. And because our economy is now so vast, a value-added tax at half the European level would generate about $800 billion in new revenue for the U.S. So then that gets you to 1.3 trillion of the 2.1 you need. And then the great thing is, if you put this purchasing power in the hands of Americans, right now 59% of Americans can't afford an unexpected $500 bill. Most everyone's living paycheck to paycheck, week to week. And so if you put this money in their hands, they're going to spend the vast majority of it in the economy. And it's going to create 4.5 million new jobs, because if you were putting $2 trillion in the hands of American consumers, then they're going to end up patronizing businesses a lot more and starting new businesses. And then you get back 25%. The public, the government, gets back 25% of the economic growth in new tax revenue. So that'll get us $500 billion. And now you're down to only $300 billion as a gap. And here's the other great thing about universal basic income is that one estimate was that if you alleviated child poverty in the U.S., you would increase GDP by $700 billion a year based on higher graduation rates, better nutrition, better mental health, higher worker productivity. And we would also save a lot of money that we're currently spending on incarceration, homelessness services, healthcare, where we spend over $1 trillion right now on various things that happen when people hit our institutions. Yeah. If you can keep someone out of the emergency room, that's like a major cost savings. Yeah. And that's what's going to happen if you're giving people $1,000 a month. So very conservatively, you get back the last $300 billion in a combination of saved costs and productivity increases, and that's being very, very conservative. So universal basic income will invest in people in the same way that companies, if they're smart, they invest in their people and they say, ooh, these people will produce more value. That's what the United States needs to start doing with us. The American people say we're going to invest in people, and then there would be so many dramatic returns that, in my opinion, the numbers I just presented are an underestimate.
Right. So once you are in office, what would need to happen legally and logistically in order to implement the universal basic income?
So I'll give you two historical precedents.
Okay.
One is that this law passed the House of Representatives in 1971 under Richard Nixon. Martin Luther King was for it. Milton Friedman was for it. 1,000 economists signed a letter saying this would be great for the economy and society if you just set an income floor for the U.S. So all you need is an act of Congress. There's absolutely no restriction on the U.S. government sending people checks. We do it all the time. About half of Americans already are getting checks from the government in some form or fashion. Yeah. And so it's just, if you see a Democratic wave coming, which I do, and then I become the president in 2020, then all I need to do is get a majority of Congress and say, hey guys, let's start sending out the freedom dividend, and then people will be in position to benefit quite quickly. And for anyone who thinks this is out of the realm of possibility, there's one state that's had a dividend for 36 years, and that's Alaska. They get between $1,000 and $2,000 per year, no questions asked. It's a Republican state. It was adopted by a Republican governor, and it's wildly popular. It's created thousands of jobs. It's improved children's health. It's reduced income inequality, and everyone loves it. So if that could happen in a very, very conservative state in Alaska, and it passed the House of Representatives in 1971, there's no reason we can't make this happen.
Right. So you mentioned Bernie Sanders briefly earlier, and a lot of his campaign rhetoric was about Wall Street and about placing taxes and more regulations on powerful financial institutions in the United States, and also within the healthcare industry, ensuring that those costs are cut even, with a single payer program. So making sure that medical costs are lower. Is that something that's going to be a big part of your campaign?
Well, there's certainly been something of a corporate takeover of American life, and certainly of American politics. But to me, the more fundamental dynamics in the economy are not that person's getting rich and which they are, and it's like you're not feeling that, which you're not. But unfortunately, things are about to become even more extreme with the advent of new technologies, where now we're looking at a world where 30% of malls are going to close, and 3.5 million truck drivers may be in danger of having their jobs automated in the next 5 to 10 years. 2.5 million call center workers might have their jobs automated. At this point, it's less soak the rich, and then everything will be okay kind of situation. Because it won't, truly. We have to actually think much, much bigger and start redefining work and value in our society. And if you are someone who has been left out of the fact that 57% of the income gains have gone to the top 1%. So obviously 99% of us did not participate in that. At least getting $1,000 a month would be an immediate value add. We can't undo the damage that's been done in the economy overnight. But this would be a massive rebalancing. Right. So that's where I am. It's less about villainizing any particular corporate actors and more about figuring out how to transition to a more advanced form of economy that emphasizes people. It's something I call a trickle-up economy, where it's people and families and communities up as opposed to corporation down. Because the fact is, right now, if corporations get money, as we've seen with this Trump tax cut, it's just going to go to share buybacks anyway. It's not going to go to workers. Only 6% of the tax bill went to workers. So we have to skip the middlemen and to start giving people money directly.
Yeah, absolutely. So switching gears a little bit, what are your thoughts on cryptocurrency regulation?
Well, I know right now the U.S. is taking a bit of a wait-and-see approach, and that there's like a bit of confusion around it, which I actually see as okay, because right now a lot of people don't really know what's going on, and so like your tension is between trying to like protect investors, which would probably circumscribe a lot of progress and innovation in the space. So to me, right now, the cryptocurrency space is very early. I mean, it's clearly like a transformative technology in its potential, the blockchain that is, and it's like many other things in my opinion, where there's like a genuine innovation at work, but then sometimes it can get a little frothy and exuberant. And so to me, right now the government's wait and see approach is probably appropriate. Certainly, if I was in charge of the government, I'd be looking at ways to use the blockchain to perform some of the government's functions more effectively. Like an ideal. Sorry.
Such as.
Well, in my case, I do want to try and build this social currency on the blockchain, but you could also potentially use it for some local voting, and make it so that hopefully it's more efficient and there's less waiting in line, and you'd have something that's, because it's public, like that there'd be no tampering. In some cases, at least right now, there's some value add to no one knowing like how people voted, I suppose. But there might be some instances where you could use it in a way that would make the democratic process more efficient.
Right. And you're an advisor on the board of a cryptocurrency called Mana, is that correct?
Yeah, I met these guys, and they're doing something so incredibly wholesome and transformative, and they're doing it. They're such high character guys. Like, I couldn't help but want to lend a hand.
Can you tell us a little bit about the project?
Yeah. So what these guys have done is they've created a cryptocurrency. It's global in scope, Mana base, and then if you sign up, then they use any of the appreciation, the value of the currency to reward its holders, where the people that, and so their goal is to try and build a platform for universal basic income worldwide. And if there was enough money flowing through it, then that could happen, independent of any government intervention. And so it's an incredible vision. Like it's an awesome set of values that they're operating under. And so for me, the most direct way to get Americans universal basic income is to become president and then make it happen with an act of Congress. But anyone who's trying to make it happen in the absence of political revolution, I'm very, very interested in helping.
Yeah, absolutely. And does this signal any kind of possibility that you would implement like a blockchain-based cryptocurrency system for distributing universal basic income?
Because about half of Americans right now are receiving government transfers, primarily through checks and direct deposit and stuff like that. My feeling is that building on something that Americans are already using is the right way to go. But I do think that we need to consider using cryptocurrency solutions around things like a new currency, and potentially a way to distribute value to Americans, where if we were to get this new currency going in a particular way, it could be that we can use that platform as a way for people to get the freedom dividend as well.
Right. And so cryptocurrency kind of historically has this like very libertarian association for, like, you can't regulate Bitcoin, man, it's outside of the government's control, and et cetera, et cetera. How is it important for you to bring cryptocurrency like further into the conversation for the Democratic Party? And if it is, how do you plan on doing that?
Well, the first thing I've done is become the first Democratic presidential candidate to ever receive contributions through Bitcoin and Ether and others, and I think the Democratic Party has to be the party of tomorrow if it's going to work. Because Republicans have unfortunately become the party of yesterday. I mean, it's like it wasn't always the case for anyone but clearly now, like that, they've really hunkered down on that. And so, hopefully, I can lead by example. Yeah. Hopefully, by having my campaign be supported through cryptocurrencies, and by my talking about things like digital social credit that would be built on the blockchain, that the Democrats look and say, okay, I don't understand what he's talking about. I don't understand what he's doing, but I have a feeling that I should, and I have a feeling that my ignorance eventually is going to make me seem like a fuddy-duddy. I mean, part of the problem is, so I'm 43 right now. I'd be 46 when I'm sworn in as president in 2021. And I think I have a pretty good read on a lot of the impacts that technology is having. A lot of the impacts technology is going to have with the labor force are really catastrophic, honestly. And it's like, I think I have a firmer sense of that because I understand technology better than others. But if you look at the average age of our national political leaders, I mean, they were legitimately born in the 1940s or 1950s. And so if you believe that technology is one of the animating forces of our society today, then we need leaders that understand it, and hopefully those leaders will be in the Democratic Party. So hopefully I can put some pressure on the Democratic Party to say, if we're going to be the party of the future, we have to start bringing forward leaders who are steeped in technology. And if we fail in that, then we're going to stay decades behind, which has gone from being unwieldy to dangerous. Like at this point, if our government is decades behind the technology curves, it could really, really leave us in very, very terrible situations very soon.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah. So I want to say that I really love the libertarian ethos of the cryptocurrency community. I really enjoyed, the reason why I'm with you on this interview is that after I started meeting people in the cryptocurrency community, I realized how deeply aligned my values were and the campaign's values were with the community. One of those values in my mind is certainly abundance, where people in the cryptocurrency community are looking toward the future and are optimistic, can do, and think we can make wonderful things happen. And we need more of that. And certainly I think universal basic income is going to be the best way we can realistically pull the country in that direction.
Okay. So if cryptocurrency does become kind of a more powerful part of, and a more, I want to say, accepted part of the U.S. economy, how do you think that will change the U.S.'s kind of global economic role, given that cryptocurrency is also playing such a big role in, South Korea and Japan and China even?
Well, it's a really interesting question. So certainly the U.S. benefits tremendously from having the global reserve currency and having a printing press. I mean, it's a fairly unique position if you reflect on it for a moment. And so one of the knee-jerk reactions to cryptocurrencies if you're the U.S. is oh no, this isn't the currency that we can control and produce and use to pay debts to other countries and the rest of it. But certainly, if I have my way as president, I mean, we're going to need new types of currencies to help reinvigorate our society. And then I think Sam Altman put out and said, look, we at this point we should have a national cryptocurrency, and if we did that, then it would, in all likelihood, be massively helpful and redistributive to Americans around the country. And so I think that's the way our government should be approaching it. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case with some people,
Mm-hmm.
but that would certainly be my approach as president.
Right. Um, so, uh, can you point to any, in the economy that you're envisioning for Andrew Yang's America? Um, can you point to any examples in the current global landscape or in the past that kind of match up with what you see for America? Can you point to any successful examples, I guess, of what you would like to implement as president?
Sure. So there's a practice called time banking that's in effect in about 200 communities around the U.S., where it values people's time intrinsically. And so if I help my neighbor haul some trash or staff a garage sale, then I earn a time dollar. And then I can use that time dollar and then give it to you for you to watch my kids or, whatever it is. And in these communities, then this has become a real store of value where if I do enough positive stuff and I have all these time dollars, then that has real value. And then I can ask people in my community to help me out. They know that the only reason I have these time dollars, I help someone else out. So that would be a vision for the future, because we have to get real where if we're going to be automating away a lot of the major labor categories, then we need to reintegrate and form a different type of economy. And so I was inspired by the fact that this is already in effect in a couple of hundred communities around the United States, where communities have found that it helps restore ties and helps produce value because, I've got 2 young kids at home. I'm a family man. And there's so much stuff that goes into just living life when you have kids and you always need help around. You're like, oh, it's and it harkens back to a time when we, it's obviously before we were born, but when there was more of a neighborhood aspect or a collective aspect or a tribal aspect. And when you have kids, you need that stuff real bad. So if you had those sorts of relationships with your friends and neighbors, as they do in these couple hundred communities around the U.S., in a higher measure, then that's the model for the future. If we get caught up in GDP and be like, oh, that person helping their neighbor doesn't do anything for GDP, it's who cares about it? Especially because, a lot of the lifting for GDP is going to be done increasingly by AI and software and machines anyway. We have to start thinking bigger and really emphasizing our own humanity, because we're not going to be able to outdo technology in more and more things. So we have to run a different type of race. And the race that we have to run has to be born of our own goals and values. That's the only bright spot I see to the automation wave that we're going to be facing, is that we'll have to explore what makes us human and what we care about. If everything goes well, if I'm president, then there's going to be a massive push in that direction. If we don't start asking those questions and pushing in that direction, then it's just going to be a race to the bottom and more people being ground up progressively, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I'm curious, so you've already been on the campaign trail, obviously, and
you should know in most campaign stops, I've been told not to talk about the digital social credit. Because,
okay, we'll pretend we didn't hear
really
anything about it.
And it's more for people who are in the cryptocurrency space.
Right.
Though I believe it wholeheartedly. It's on my website. It's in my book.
Yeah.
But my campaign staff is just look, people don't get it.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later. But I'm curious, when you go to these small towns in the Midwest, where I'm from, and you talk about universal basic income, and maybe it's the first time that people have heard of the concept, or that it's never been talked about in a realistic way. What kinds of reactions are you getting from those people?
I mean, you grew up in a small town in the Midwest, I mean, for most people, it's too good to be true, that's fantastic, or how could someone get something for nothing, that. That's the first reaction sometimes.
Yeah.
And then after I say hey, it's been in effect in Alaska, hey, economy's changing for good because of technology, hey, it passed the House of Representatives. Then they started thinking about it. And they're like, you're right. My mall is closing. You're right. They really are. And so then when I frame it the right way, then they start thinking it's like, well, I guess we can do that. There's like no reason we couldn't. And for many people, because I meet mainly with Democrats because I'm running for president as a Democrat, then you say like, look, the things you care about, education, women's rights, the environment, like they can all be helped by putting more money into people's hands and then having them make good, strong choices. And then they get excited because many progressives feel like they've been fighting a losing battle, particularly in the Midwest and like parts of the country you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think, so at least from what I've seen so far, and this could also be the results of my own Google bias or whatever, the way that Google AdSense is catering to my searches. But most of the things that I've seen from your campaign so far have been focused around this idea of universal basic income, which is a fantastic idea and a very strong, in my own opinion, a very strong base. I'm curious, as the race continues to go along, and more conversations around immigration and foreign policy, and those kinds of things come up. Do you think that there's any other? Do you think that that's something that you'll have to kind of embrace more in order to be really serious contender for this race?
Yeah, I mean, it is the case that people who focus on one issue tend to be marginalized in a national race. And so as I gain popularity, I'll be asked to chime in on more issues. And I will say that on my website, I have 72 policy proposals on immigration and many other things. I have opinions and viewpoints about most things that I believe are quite reasonable. And so that will come out over time. I do think that the most direct and beneficial thing that our government could do for tens of millions of Americans is to send everyone $1,000 a month. And so I lead with that because everything else is, in my opinion, pretty marginal compared to that impact, and also the preservation of our way of life, which I believe this is going to be increasingly necessary for. But yeah, like I'm confident about my ability to speak forthrightly and intelligently about any of a number of issues. And I even have this foreign policy team waiting in the wings that wants to coach me up Matrix style and all of like the world's hotspots, which I'm sort of putting off because I'm like, let's wait until, it's debate time before I cram my head full of like all of the global like geopolitical stuff. But, I'm looking forward to that, though. I just like information, and so like my ability to become the president. My instinct is that a lot of the times people want to hear about your viewpoint on particular issues, partially as like a test of like your judgment or intellect, and then sometimes they actually care about what you think about that specific country or whatnot. But my identity, as people I think can tell, it's like I'm an Asian guy, tech entrepreneur who's focused on the economy, and so the last thing anyone's worried about from me is like, am I smart enough to figure out like what's going on, like together? And honestly, like that's not really gonna be like the pitfall for me. Like we joke with like my team too. It's like, what are the stereotypes around Asian guys, and like most of them are that I'd be like, I just wouldn't be very caring, and so I was talking frankly about like the stereotypes. I mean, it's like I am the first Asian guy to run for president as a Democrat in the nation's history. So I'm aware of. So long story short, it's like if I win, it's going to be because Americans have figured out what I'm talking about, which is like the economy's changed for good, and we have to move to the next level. And no one's going to be worried about whether I can competently articulate ideas around foreign policy and the rest of it, in my opinion.
Yeah. So what role do you think that your race is playing or going to play in the presidential race?
Well, what's fun, Rachel, is I'm already yanking people's platforms around. Like
Okay.
it's really quite fun.
Oh, tell me more.
So like Fox did a piece on various Democratic platforms, and then there I was, and then now people are really focusing more on the automation problem, where Democrats are talking about a jobs guarantee, which I happen to think is a terrible idea, but at least they're like looking at solutions to like the macro problems.
Like maybe this will work.
Yeah, and so like I'm already seeing people focusing on a different set of issues, and it might have happened without me. But like my team and I look around, and like it's quite often that we put something out there, and then someone else who's running for president ends up making an announcement that's responsive to it. So I already feel like we're pushing the conversation in very positive directions.
Good. Okay.
But I'm not here to push conversations in positive directions. I'm here to win and transform society. So, like I'm really increasingly confident that I'm going to make that debate stage and then really open a lot of eyes.
Yeah. So, speaking of debate, we both know the 2016 election rhetoric was really toxic, really, really aggressive, and like, the way that the candidates talk to each other, particularly our current president, would address other candidates was unheard of. Do you think that similar rhetoric is going to carry over into the 2020 election? And if so, what is your plan for those kinds of moments when you might be on the debate stage and someone is going really, really low? I'm just curious.
I was just in Iowa this past week, and a very nice man said to me after he heard me speak, he said, I would love to see you debate Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Because, and these were his words, but he said that you're like his polar opposite, that you're smart, reasonable, and very, very numbers driven, whereas Donald Trump is, not any of those things. And so he suggested that I would win through the contrast, and he said that that it would be like night and day, and you would win that. My campaign staff and I joke about what Donald Trump's nickname for me would be, and we've come up with Comrade Yang. Somewhat racially tinged and a little socialist sounding, and a bunch of the rest of it.
Yeah.
But we're going to keep making progress, and I believe I would whip Donald Trump, honestly, because I understand the big mistake that Democrats have made is that they don't understand that Donald Trump's addressing legitimate grievances.
Yeah.
And we have legitimately devastated the economies of millions and millions of Americans, and people are right to be angry and pissed off about it and sad. And then I have a genuine plan to try and make that better.
Yeah.
Which is to flood our consumer economy with purchasing power and put people in position to make better choices for themselves. So I would win that debate easily. And then if you did call me Comrade Yang and the rest of it, it would be a good time.
Okay. My last question, and this is a very serious question. Do you have a private email server in your basement?
No, I really don't.
Okay.
I really don't. I do have some staffs around, but we're using the good stuff in terms of just commercial service providers like Gmail and the rest of it. But I don't have a private email server. It'd probably cause more harm than good, as we've seen.
Yeah. Andrew Yang, thank you so much for your time.
No problem. It's a pleasure. And for anyone who's watching this that wants to support, and you got to be American because we check this stuff, but go to yang2020.com, which is my presidential campaign's website. We do accept donations in both fiat and cryptocurrency, and there is a process for cryptocurrency at yang2020.com/crypto. But I have to say that people in the cryptocurrency community, you all are building the future, you're forward thinking, and we have to try and bring the rest of America, the rest of the world, really, to that level. And so if you imagine a world where I become president, we implement universal basic income, most of the world now regards America as sort of retro and backwards, and so they'd be shocked if we moved that far, that fast. But think about what effect that would have. Other Western countries would then say, if America can do it, maybe we can do it too. This is an opportunity for us to advance the species. If I become president, and then we get people thinking about work and value in different ways and think in terms of abundance, and then that message can spread, that reality can spread throughout Western civilization. And I can see the path to get there, but I need your help. So come to yang2020.com and let's build a movement, and we can make this real. We don't have unlimited time, so let's make it happen. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. Take care, and best of luck to you.